Are you ready to explore a mix of growth, resilience, and some seriously bold wins? If so, join me as I interview Michelle Fitzgerald on the latest episode of the Daring to Transcend podcast. So Michelle Fitzgerald is the CEO of Modern Client, where they use leadership and storytelling to bring brands and people forward in a crowded digital world. So that's really an exciting objective, Michelle. And I know you've got a whole world of background in sales and marketing and probably a lot of other things. So why don't you start by telling us a little bit about your story and how you got to be the CEO of Modern Client?
Well, Modern Client actually started out as kind of a training ground for all of my wild marketing concepts and ideas. So I've been in sales and marketing my entire life, 26 years, and I've always dabbled into different experimental growth marketing with new tools and new concepts. And so I formed a corporation around it because back before COVID, I was learning a lot about different automation tools, and I was going to start a marketing company in that time frame. And when COVID kind of hit, I had a client secured that was kind of gonna launch my business forward, and it was a big deal for me, and kind of bridge my exit from my corporate America life to kind of running and building my own business. And it kind of stalled out and lulled. And through that time frame, I just kept the business going in little side projects. And then I used it while I worked for the company that I work for. I used it as a testing ground to test different products to see if they would work, and then I would bring them into the business as I could see that they were like proof to concept that they were working. So over the past, 3 or 4 years, I've just kind of used it as a trading ground for all the thoughts that were going through my mind on how to test stuff.
Which sounds like a lot of fun. So you are talking openly about your exit from corporate America. Tell me about that. What's driving that for you?
I think it's just a pull, really. I think we come to this conclusion in life when you get to a certain part that what does Michelle want? What does Michelle want to do? And as women, I feel like we spend a lot of our lives in different roles, mothering and working and supporting our families. And I feel like hopefully we come to this part where we're like, okay, I think it's my turn to build something that Michelle wants and Michelle can impact the world with. And that is kind of where I'm at. And I haven't done the complete exit. So why it's so neat is that I'm actually the living, breathing transition of still involved in both, very much so, and juggling, building Modern Client in taking the marketing concepts that I know and building this interview style product where we can bring brands that are making an impact in the world forward on video, and then provide them with that vehicle to really get out there from a marketing perspective. So right now I'm kind of juggling both. And what my vision is, what I foresee happening is, I've built a lot of amazing relationships in corporate America, and everybody's kind of been around for the ride and seen who I was as a person and the work that I've done, that I'm envisioning that the corporation that I'm with now is going to allow me to continue, but as a client in the future, and then just build from that. But, I'm in my steps, so I'm prepared for, whichever way the universe is guiding me on how that looks.
Which is great. And it's interesting that you bring that up, because there's so many women that I talk to and people who have watched this podcast more than once. It's a recurring theme that women get to a certain point in their lives. And typically I see that, late 40s, early 50s, sometime in that 45 to 55 range, where that starts to become a real driver for women. And they start to think, okay, I've done all this. And I went through this myself, right? I've done all this. I've sacrificed for the corporation. I've done what was needed there. And certainly that is my career. I just did what was needed there. And I got to the point where it's like, okay, what what do I really want to play with, right? What talents do I want to start developing or exploring for myself?
Mhm.
And, for me, that was a lot, obviously starting around writing and my books and that kind of stuff. But storytelling, which is something, that we both have in common,
Yeah.
the storytelling piece. So besides this, spending time doing what other people need for the beginning part of our careers and our lives, and then this shift to what do I want? Is there something deeper going on than that for you personally?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's definitely a pull in trying to integrate, physical, spiritual, mental, all of that. Like what do I get to step into? Who do I get to be when you start backing up and gaining that type of awareness of yourself and your wants and your needs and the people around you, and really figuring out where are you most happy, what brings you the most amount of joy? Because when I'm in my joy, I'm able to give more joy to others, as opposed to kind of feeling trapped or stuck around, whatever the circumstance is. And I really think that we spend the majority of our lives kind of in these sleepy cycles of, the good, life is good, we're doing the family, we're going through the motions, and you have your milestones, right? You get pregnant with your children, and that's super exciting, and that's like your step and your part. And I just feel like you get to this point that you really kind of wake up a little bit, and you have this drive or this pull, and all of a sudden you're like, I found, your purpose kind of starts coming together of all of the pieces that you have been through in life and all of the value that you're able to offer others. And in that is where you're finding your own purpose. And that's kind of where you need to stay, like in that flow of how do I find the most impactful way to give back that allows me to be the best self that I can be, also by rippling that out to the people around me. And I think that really is what internally started happening for me. And I had some, and I started struggling with feelings of like resentment and anger, like, okay, it's my turn. And at every direction, you're kind of fighting the struggle, like family wants one thing and husband wants one thing. And it's scary because your main support mechanisms may not always feel as stable. And that's when you realize you're like, well, I mean, who you are and what you've done is enough to pull that forward. And I think that is where you find like your power, where you're like, okay, I know what I'm capable of. I've done this my whole life, and now it's just my turn to do it at a different degree.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of things in there that I wanna pull out to talk about a little bit deeper. One was, the whole idea that you mentioned earlier about, pulling everything together from both a mental, emotional, spiritual, physical standpoint. And I think one of the things that we do, I know was a driver for me, is in corporate life, we typically are driven primarily by our rational brain, which is fine. That's a valuable tool in our toolbox, but it's not the only tool. And I feel like particularly as women, although I certainly know men that experience this too, you get to a point where you want to be more integrated, where you want to be, and which is, one of the things that I work with women about, this whole integrating your whole self, bringing everything to the table and not just putting yourself into these compartments. I'm this rational, calm, cool, collected person at work. I'm, a caring, nurturing person at home, whatever, my creative expression maybe isn't even happening at all, all of those things. And I think that integration is so important. In what ways do you think you're bringing that integration into this new adventure that you're starting?
I love that question. That's an awesome, awesome question. And I see the progression through my career as you go from, this box of where you know the perimeters that you can stay within. And then as you progress in your leadership role, because I lead people in my corporate job, you start to toy with a little bit more your empowerment of let's try this idea, or let's do it this way, and you build more confidence in that aspect. But there always becomes a point that it's not your vision, and that's kind of where I see, like, respectively, I love the people that I work with and work under probably more than most people, which is why it's been so hard to separate, because I've literally watched this company grow up over the past 5 years, and what they were 5 years ago and what they are now, I'm just super proud of them. So there's a heart aspect of that, and that you had a part of that. So that's been a little bit of a separation, a detachment for me to go on to the next step, which has been difficult. But back to the original question, I think respectively, the vision of this company that I've poured my heart into is not my vision for me. And that only can go so far because it's not yours. And that's kind of where I am in my step. It's like, okay, if I really want to have the true autonomy to bring to the world what I'm capable of in all these facets and everything that is Michelle, then I need that type of flexibility in order to stand in all of that. And that's not always acceptable in certain environments. It creates conflict. And, really standing in and believing in something, you tend to run into a lot of obstacles, because if you're empowering yourself to believe one way, there's going to be opposition always, right?
Sure.
So I think, and that's with anything in life, right? You stand for something, and there are going to be people that don't like it, and that's okay, and you got to be okay with that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really, that is really important, because one of the things I think as women we're often taught, to be pleasers, right? To grease the wheels, to make everybody happy, to get along with everyone. And I know I spent a lot of my corporate career doing that, helping everybody get along. And that was important in that role. And it is important to do that. So I'm not discounting that. But to your point, at some point, it's like, okay, no, I want to take a stand on something that's important to me. And that means ruffling some feathers.
100%.
Right.
And the culture that I want to build with Modern Client is, I believe, in my vision, I believe that when people are thriving is when they're integrating these different parts of themselves and they're tapping into their creative energy. And I want to build an environment where that is acceptable, where that is, I take you in all of the faces that you are, and let's create our best work together. And that's what I want to do. That's what I want to help CEOs do in really trying to integrate that message and pull it outward, because a lot of people are coming to these points, and I think they're coming to them earlier and earlier in life.
Yes.
Especially with, there's a lot of exiting with corporate America, with the rise of different technologies. The entry point has never been so low for you to go and do your own thing as it is now, because of all the tools that are available.
Yeah, but it's still not easy, right?
No,
it's still not easy. And I think, you touched on a really important point about the many people, women a lot, but men too, who are exiting corporate America, the talent drain, because we're getting to this point where, okay, I can't keep myself in this box that I have to stay in order to stay in the corporate environment. That's how I always felt like, okay, here's the box, and I can't stay in this box anymore. And
100%.
While the boxes have value, in some ways, they also restrict everything we can bring to the table. And I'm going to go back to something else you said a few minutes ago when you talk about resentments. And one of the things that I talk about when I talk about risk taking, which is something that I'm extremely passionate about, is one of the ways you're not taking the risks that you need to be taking to live your life to the fullest is when those angers and those resentments build up. If you are resentful, there is some area of your life where you're holding yourself back, right? Where you're not getting your needs met, or you're not expressing yourself, or you're not doing what you need to do to reach that level of fulfillment and self-expression.
I love that.
And the resentment is such an important indicator to me. When somebody says I'm resentful, that's really, okay, why? What are you resentful of? And what are you holding back in yourself? Because it's usually not what the other person is doing as much as it's what you're doing.
No, it's internal.
Yeah, it's internal.
It's so internal. And I've seen the cycle, so I can recognize it. As we grow older, we can recognize it a little bit more, right? Where you once felt thriving and fulfilled, you're now feeling like, ugh, you know,
Yeah.
And that's not the right approach. That's not productive for anybody, for you, for anybody around you. So I think it's something to, like you said, it's a sign to really pay attention and say, why do I have these feelings? And I would say the biggest thing is to observe them and sit with them and really try to figure out deep down inside what is bringing that. And for me in my scenario, I just know what I'm capable of. And I definitely felt capped at a certain level, that there's nowhere else to be or go, or nothing else to be here in this step. So unfortunately, as much as I love everybody and what we're doing, Michelle has the capacity to expand, and that's not what it looks like here. And that's okay, right?
Yeah. And I had a similar experience where there wasn't a way to expand, and there wasn't a way to expand in the way I wanted to.
Right.
Because I really wanted to go in a different direction. And the whole, it just changed the way I looked at things, because I was like, okay, I've wanted to write all of my life. I've kind of put that all on the back burner, all in on this career, which is great. I don't regret that in the slightest, because I learned so much, and it was an incredible experience. And I think I grew tremendously as a person. But it's like, okay, I need to go back to some of the things that I really want to grow in a way that I'm directing at this point. I think that's kind of it, where I'm directing my growth versus somebody else kind of directing it. Yeah,
you're driving. And I have an amazing partner also. So that's been very helpful for me in this transition, feeling the support, but the support at the same level as me. Driving something together has been really cool. I really like that. And being somebody that's always kind of wanted to do things herself, it's also more growth for me to learn, trust and putting that trust in other people also. But it's also about alignment too. So what I had to make sure when we launched this company is that the alignment was really strong. And that we both bring something to the table that we don't have without each other, and that we both have the same alignment of what we're going to be able to do together. And I think that really that's going to keep keep the momentum, even when, with growing a business, even when things get tough, that we're just all in. And that is like super, super cool. So I couldn't be more excited.
And I think that's awesome too. And I think even the fact that you're using the word alignment and having alignment, it's not only alignment with each other, but it's alignment with yourselves, which, circles back to that whole integration thing. When you're integrated, when you're having all of your mind, body, spirit, emotions, heart working together, it does create an alignment within yourself that helps your forward momentum. And then when you can get other people around you that are also aligned in a similar way, nobody's exactly the same, but that alignment matches, right? That alignment is compatible.
You're feeding
each other. It changes the whole dynamic of everything. And it's so important to have support in the journey of, exiting corporate. It's very enticing to be, okay, I'm going to do this all on my own and own the vision, like you were talking about earlier. But it also is hard, and it helps to have a really good support system around you, which is awesome that you're building that as well.
I agree. I think that is so important. And I also believe as women, we have a hard time accepting support. For one reason or another, life conditioning and trials and hard times and being on your own and stuff like that. I had a rough past, a rough childhood, and I think part of that has made me as resilient as I am, but also part of that is things that I work on about, like about trusting others and about accepting that support as yes, this is support. I think that's something that we kind of walk on eggshells in that trust aspect.
Yeah, totally. And often we are expected to pick up all the pieces, right? At home, at the office, and be independent. And it's both something that we want for ourselves in some ways, and in some ways it's also kind of expected of us as women too. So I want to just change directions a little bit before we wrap up. And in your bio and in the beginning of the introduction here, you talk about your seriously bold wins. So tell me about what your seriously bold wins were.
So my specialty is taking a pile of nothing and making it into something. And I know that sounds crazy, but I think my entire life it's been that way. And I've built marketing programs from a pencil and a piece of paper, successful ones that were generating, large amounts of revenue for corporate America. And I think that boldly, you talk about taking risks. I've taken a lot of risks in my career in really speaking into the theories that I believe in and trying to bring them to proof to concept. So I think, showing the proof to concept and building those wins really was part of the journey for me to give me the confidence to say, if you do take these things here and go search and find the pieces that you need to find, you are 1000% capable of putting anything together that you need to. And that's what I've learned along the way. So when I say wins, I mean, just taking something from literally nothing, like here, Michelle, here's a project. We don't know how to do it or what to do at all, but can you go figure that out? And being able to replicate that over and over again has really helped me with my own confidence level.
Yeah. And I think that's such an important aspect of really looking at our wins, big or small. They don't all have to be big, bold wins, but looking at our wins, big and small, and building on them and really celebrating ourselves. Because I think as women, we don't always celebrate ourselves. And one of the things that I'm learning, particularly through my work with positive intelligence, but also in other aspects of my life, is how important it is to stop and celebrate even the tiniest little things, because that changes everything. It's actually a neurological response when we celebrate. It creates dopamine, it creates positive feelings, and it helps us build on good habits and build on things that make our lives better. But so often we just say, oh yeah, we did this, and then we talk about all the things that we didn't do, or it wasn't that big a deal. We downplay our wins. So I love that you own your big, bold wins. And
thank you.
I think that's so important. And I would encourage our listeners. Yeah, I would encourage our listeners.
We have a hard time as women saying, I did that. Yes. Nobody else did that. I did that. And I think it is difficult for us because I feel like there's a condition with, there's a fine line between like arrogance and confidence, or being humble and also owning it. And I think women struggle with that. Like what is the balance between those two? And when I go back and look at what I've done throughout my career, I mean, I'm telling a story. Like my whole life is telling a story. And the story that I'm telling is that it doesn't really matter how you start. What matters is what you do after. Your education level, your past. I mean, like I've been through the muck, and taking all of that and continuing to build the story and tell the story. I think that it's a story of hope and resilience, and a story that people can say, wow, like if she could do that, I could do that too.
Yes, which is one of the reasons that I write my books and have my podcasts, because our stories are so important, and how we tell our stories, how we look at our own stories just can totally change things. I mean, you can look at your story and you can say, okay, I failed here, I lost here, I had this struggle here.
Or me.
Or you can look at your story and say, hey, I had big, bold wins. I triumphed here. I overcame adversity here. And look how far I've come. And we've all come so much further than we think we have, that we give ourselves credit for.
I agree. And I don't think it's any particular, like, I'm not saying it's just me. Everybody has it. And everybody has the ability to do that. And they just have to believe it. And I think that is half of the battle is believing in yourself and believing in what you're capable of and really going after it.
Yeah, 100%. I love that. So if people want to learn more about Modern Client, how do they get in touch with you?
They can go to the website, www.modern-client.com. I also have a big following on LinkedIn, so you can find me there. And we have a show that you can also follow there. But I would say either LinkedIn or Modern Client, and it's Michelle Fitzgerald on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Michelle, for joining us today. Your story was very inspiring. And listeners, if you want to learn more about my story or my books, or connect with me to rewrite your story, please reach out at daringtotranscend.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn, Karen Ann Bulluck. Join us again next week for another episode of the Daring to Transcend podcast.